So good morning again, everyone. My name is Jamal Brooks-Hawkins. I am a second year PhD student in the School of Social Transformation, and with a focus, of course, in gender studies. And today I will be talking about from a country where other people live, racism, critical race relations, and movement for equity. I'll be moving through some of the slides to introduce certain concepts, and then at other times I'll be highlighting particular items that we may or may not think of in terms of equity, but we definitely should consider. So I want to start with this quote by Audre Lorde. I know beyond fear and history that our teaching means keeping trust with less and less correctness only with ourselves. History may alter old pretenses and victories, but not the pain, my sister, never the pain. In this quote from Audre Lorde, we think about the idea of the role fear plays in history and pain, because oftentimes we think of coming to the present as a moment in time, but really it is a continuation of historical moments. So in thinking through and thinking about a journey of where we currently are, contextualizing what our relationships to race, sexuality, and gender must be observed. In this presentation, I argue that we have to go beyond the pale of race relations to look at critical race relations from an intersectional and critical race theory perspective. I'm gonna show this video. It's about 8 minutes long. So, and then we'll kind of talk through this. Please let me know if you can hear it with a thumbs up.
What do we want? When do we want it?
Black history in the United States and protests go hand in hand, and people of color have had to continually advocate for equal rights.
Police are advancing again.
The last year has brought this ongoing struggle to the forefront, but it's also shed light on the stark contrast between two Americas, where a peaceful Black protest was met with violent police clashes, but a deadly insurrection left officers overrun.
What we see is that Black folks simply, and people of color simply don't have the latitude to act out publicly, whether it's righteous or not, in ways that whiteness is always allowed to act out publicly. When you see the level of force that was erected in response to Black Lives Matter over the summer in DC, those protesters would have never even gotten close to the Capitol to the way that we saw those white protesters on January 6th.
That disparity in police presence at the Capitol has led many to ask, would the response have been different if the protesters were Black?
There's always been a sense that Black folks were asking for more than they deserved, and that they were willing to engage that by taking on forms of violence. What Black Lives Matter is a direct extension of what we saw with the civil rights movement in the 1960s and nonviolent protests even before then.
It also ties into, I would say, a much longer history that creates expectations that we're still trying to unpack or still trying to dismantle in 2020, 2021. And those are expectations that Black people are dangerous and violent. And law enforcement, unfortunately, in too many cases, carries that mythology. In contrast, you're thinking on January 6th that white people are the power brokers in society, may create a very different and more hands-off police response.
In the days leading up to Donald Trump's Save America rally, there were warning signs of the violence to come.
They're not taking this White House. We're going to fight like hell, I'll tell you right now.
The Capitol Police, and they basically have said this, that they did have intelligence about that this could be an unruly crowd.
If you're gonna be the zero and not the hero, we're coming for you.
The police chief, this is his own words, went to the sergeant at arms and said, I think we might really need the National Guard. And they waved him off and apparently told him they didn't like the optics of having the military there.
Police are squabbling with protesters. Oh, there we go.
In contrast with other events in DC last year, additional state and federal law enforcement agencies were not pre-staged ahead of the riot. And as the crowd pushed past barricades and made their way up the Capitol steps, police were quickly overwhelmed.
For whatever reason, the decision was made to basically, in my view, set up the Capitol Police to fail. And that's exactly what happened. You have low barricades that hook together, you can virtually step over them. You only really have the Capitol Police, you don't have the National Guard, nobody's in riot gear, you're too close to the building. I mean, it sort of goes on and on and on.
I've never been in this house, how about you?
Although many were later arrested on federal charges, on the day of the insurrection, only 61 people were arrested. DC police arrested more than 5 times as many people at the June 1st Black Lives Matter protest. The event that took place at the Capitol shined a light on what's seen as a double standard in police response between Black and white protesters.
To see the police response against Black Lives Matter protesters over the late spring and summer with a very different response on January 6th was quite striking. And certainly one of the explanations for that was the different racial composition of the crowds at those two protests and the different particular aims and grievances of those crowds.
Following the death of George Floyd in May 2020, demonstrators held protests across the country. In response, at least 40 cities imposed curfews, and National Guard members were activated in 15 states and Washington, D.C.
The Black Lives Matter protests were overwhelmingly peaceful. If we look at the statistics, very few injuries, very few protests had property damage, even though that was what was often highlighted in the media.
It's not surprising that even when we see nonviolent protests, as we did throughout the summer of 2020, and I'm thinking explicitly about the protests in Washington, D.C., in which we suddenly see flyovers, right? And we see a response to it that is not in line with what the threat actually is on the ground.
In June 2020, police used overwhelming force against Black Lives Matter protesters in Washington, D.C.
You have this spontaneous event where the president decides that he wants to hold a photo op in front of a church. And so he gets this reinforcement of people in riot gear to literally move this peaceful crowd by and large with pepper spray, etc. So total overreaction to what was going on. The events at Black Lives Matter and the event at the Capitol were both colossal failures for law enforcement.
Throughout history, there have been dozens of peaceful Black protests met with a disproportionate police response.
When we talk about the genius of Martin Luther King beyond his oratory, but strategically understanding that nonviolent protests that was going to be broadcast around the world would bring attention to the fact that these folks were protesting nonviolently, but yet they were treated in very violent ways.
Excuse me, Jamal, sorry to interrupt you here, but your video audio cut out.
Sorry, it seems as though I lost sound. Can people not hear the video?
We cannot hear the video, but we can hear you.
Huh, okay.
Any white
What
Americans,
about now?
it was as if they had just found out that
What about now? Can you all hear the video
white
now?
supremacy is also intimately connected to law enforcement and even our military forces. You know, this is
I'm gonna go back just a little bit.
paying attention to the fact that these folks were protesting non-violently, but yet they were treated in very violent ways.
We feel that we have to do it this way in order to bring the evil out into the open, so that this community will be forced to deal with it.
If there is one element of contemporary protest that changed the game, it is no question that it's handheld devices. Beginning with the Rodney King case back in 1991, where a white man who was in an apartment innocently pulled out his video camera and captured what was happening to Rodney King on tape, it was a game changer.
Over the last decade, incidents of police abuse captured on camera have skyrocketed.
The way that the Black Lives Matter generation has been able to weld social protests in the streets, nonviolent, along with social media, has allowed them to pay attention to some of the disconnections between their protests and what's actually how they're being perceived by some white Americans.
We ain't hurt not one cop, but you all look at me like I'm your enemy.
Videos of the 2014 Black Lives Matter protests in Ferguson, Missouri went viral and brought intense scrutiny to police violence.
The Ferguson piece was really important because you got to see on the ground the way that protesters were being tear gassed, right? The way that they could respond immediately to what was happening to them, right? We didn't have to watch newsreel footage as we did during the Civil Rights Movement.
Just as the police response in Ferguson illuminated the issue in policing, so did the discrepancy in law enforcement's response in Washington, D.C.
The riots on January 6th were a sort of crowning moment on a number of events that were all pointing in the same direction. Here is another reminder that that battle over how we understand who's entitled in our society and whether certain groups should be privileged over others is an ongoing dispute.
For many white Americans, it was as if they had just found out that white supremacy existed, that white supremacy is also intimately connected to law enforcement and even our military forces. You know, this is something that folks who've been fighting against white supremacy and dealing with anti-racist politics have long understood.
What happened on January 6th and the contrast with how the protesters were treated this past summer when it was Black Lives Matter. I'm hopeful that for some people that is a moment when their eyes open up. Potentially for people, it shakes their complacency and it shakes their willingness to overlook what to them might have in the past been more subtle signs of the racism that's baked into US history.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking. Out the
Sorry, I couldn't find my video. Okay. So a few things that the video points out and really highlights is the idea that there are these two very different countries, that there is hypocrisy, that there are a number of ways in which social division shows up. One is through law enforcement, one is through health, one is through education, right? And so we really are looking at a moment in time that allows us to really examine this dichotomy, or these contradictions. So we saw on January 6th, several hundred supporters of President Trump charged into the Capitol to overturn an election that the president had repeatedly and falsely claimed was stolen, right? The idea that one man could have this power over millions of people to cause this particular event. Most of the participants white, and roaming free in the Capitol halls. On June 1st, 2020, a crowd of similar size gathered outside the White House to protest after the police killing of George Floyd, whose trial just began. They were a diverse group who called for an end to police brutality and racial inequity, and an army of federal agents assembled after Trump demanded a show of domination, sent them running with chemical agents and rubber bullets. If we look through and at, oh, I just realized that I am not. If we look at this from a critical race lens, and really understand that there are these ways of looking at and understanding how we came to this point in time, and how we came to understand why and how we have to deepen our understanding of both critical race theory and intersectionality as they become combined and conjoined. When we understand that the long Black freedom struggle comes from a place of understanding which allows us, which really allows us to understand that the long Black freedom struggle is not, as the video said, Black Lives Matter is a continuation of a longer movement, a longer ideology, a longer history that we have to acknowledge. Within the long Black freedom struggle, though, there have been these pockets of time, place, and space, divisions within the Black power movement, but also the contributions that come along and with the long Black freedom struggle have long been either erased or overshadowed. Today, I am arguing that Black Lives Matter, while the intent of it started very specifically, we look at this in an intersectional lens, and to understand that it's not just Black men who have contributed to the long Black freedom struggle. It is Black women, it is Black LGBTQ, it is Black, those who are disabled or differently abled, and African American. So when we think about this idea of the whole person, the holistic, we also must think in terms of movements as that way. Something that we'd like to point out is this idea, as you can see from the cartoon, right? How long did the white man have his knee on the neck of the Black man? 8 minutes and 46 seconds, right? The idea that we are very specifically looking at a particular instance, a particular motivation in a particular time, but in actuality, it is a continuation of these ideas that have culminated, permeated, and really undergird a lot of what American society has come to be. There's a danger in separating race and racism in the United States. As David Mason suggests, disconnecting race and racism while insisting on retention of a concept of race would really validate the scientific concept denoting a real biological division of the human species. This must be understood as the idea of we cannot separate out race and racism, because if we do, then we erase several hundred years of disenfranchisement and humanization, as well as de jure and de facto oppression. When we think of race relations, we often think very specifically Black, white, Black, Asian, Black, Hispanic, right? But what we don't always do is look critically at what this really means and what people are truly saying in our conversations. So according to Pew, sorry, I just lost you all. Hello? Okay. Okay, we're back. According to Pew Research, a majority of Americans say race relations in the United States are bad, and those about 7 in 10 say things are getting worse. Roughly 2/3 say it has become more common for people to express racist or racially insensitive views since Donald Trump was elected, even if not necessarily more acceptable. The very existence of the way in which power comes to be and how power is framed must be taken into consideration when we think about the relationships between race. The connection to race, race relations, racism, how we are and where we are in the long Black freedom struggle, but also to understand that through this, we have erased a lot of intersecting ways of being. So we've heard of Black women, for the most part, being a part of the of feminism. We do know that there is this idea that at a certain point, Black women had to make a decision between being feminist or being Black, right? You could not be both. And so we have come to a place now where we recognize that those that distinction, those dichotomies are absolutely absurd. However, we continue, it is my argument that we continue to have this underlying macho philosophy of the ways in which we approach liberation movements, as well as equity, diversity, and inclusion. It is still a masculinist way of looking at, because the more aggressive we are in attacking diversity, equity, diversity, and inclusion, the more we find ourselves in the state of we are doing something. I also call into question, my research also calls into question the idea of nonviolence within social movements. So if we think about nonviolence, obviously as an ideology, but as a response to violence, we also have to recognize that there was violence within the movements that oftentimes women, specifically Black women, bared the brunt of. So I ask, how can we say that we have nonviolent movements when we had violence in the movements that we occurred? If we are then continuing on a legacy of these social movements and movement building, how then can we say that if we are building upon these, that we are not still enacting violence? And so my argument is really about recognizing the lineage and genealogies of the long Black freedom struggle so that we can eliminate or reduce the violences that happen within social movements. If we look at gay liberation, gay liberation oftentimes modeled Black Panther approaches to dealing with police violence, both in armed self-defense and electoral politics. So we have to understand that if we look at the relationship between Black power movements and the rights of LGBTQ individuals, we do recognize that we have to focus or we have to acknowledge within certain movements that there was a relationship, but also that there was violence and a disconnect within these two movements. And within several movements, right? There was a disconnect with the feminist movement. There's a disconnect, even though they are interconnected. And the work that really encourages us to understand these liberation movements is integral to us understanding not only our current relationships and the dichotomies that we see in race relations, but also the systems by which we consider to be liberatory. I'm just gonna check time. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna move through this fairly quickly. The idea really then, after I've now said all that, is the concept of imbricating movements. Imbricating movements is this idea of not only recognizing that we have an intersectional way of viewing the world, but we also we use it as not just a theory or a methodology, but a heuristic. Patricia Hill Collins and Selma Bilge very specifically talk about intersectionality as a heuristic that we can then see and learn from. With imbricating movements, it is a combination of Black feminist thought. It is a theory that we can unpack to show how different social movements actually are interconnected, but also, just like the Black Lives Matter movement has highlighted, the inconsistencies in the ways in which we approach one another from an intersectional perspective. I don't walk into a space and I'm just Black, right? I don't walk into a space and I'm just male. I don't walk into a space and I'm just gay. I don't walk into a space and I'm just a student, right? Like these are all things that make up my identity that I bring to the table that both fuel my my engagement and my interaction, but also my passions. So I think that it is really important in this theory of imbricating movements that we recognize the role that violence has played within social movements, the role that hypocrisy has played, but more importantly, what I argue in this new theory of social movement building is that one of the things that must be highlighted is the joy that comes from engaging and interacting with other people in social movements. Some of the best and most wonderful times in my life have been when I have been in space with activists and artists that some sit in this room. And while we are all down for the cause, the laughter and joy that comes from us just speaking about being human and understanding how my rights, my humanity is tied up in the movements that other people champion. In 2010, we saw this when we saw Black activists come together with Latino and white activists, as well as LGBTQ and disabled activists to protest SB 1070. So I end with the same way I began, with Audre Lorde and understanding there is no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives. we have to start to look at both our history as well as our present and how we are approaching the ways in which not only we ask for and demand the ideologies of being seen as human, but also to start to really break down the dichotomous countries that we live in. We are the United States of America, so we must stop pretending as though, one, we are completely united, two, that our history does not involve violence in several different forms, and three, that we have now come to a place in which, as Adrienne Marie Brown recently said, we wish we were at a place of running, and we are not. We are at a place in which we are like a 2-year-old, getting up on the table, needing support, taking a step, face planting, and getting back up. We are just at those beginning stages. However, if we begin to look through an intersectional lens and understand that we imbricate movements, we can start to have a better and justified ideology. So I will stop there and take questions.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't see any hands up. If I may speak. So I have a question. Can you hear me, Jamal?
I can.
That was excellent. Thank you so much. As I was listening to your talk, I thought about many things. And one thing was, I'm not free until we are all free. And you, as the president of you have many roles, students, and you're very, very active. And one thing that I've heard people say, especially about minority students, is like, oh, we're really active in those organizations, we're not spending enough time on our priority or whatever. For me, I remember it from the days that I did research. You know, I was doing very, very like innovative research in San Diego from 2006 to 2014, creating ethnically diverse stem cells. And the science is very important, and that's what gets you published and what gets you whatever. But there was that social aspect of it that people weren't addressing, because I'm trying to get samples from people of color, and they are not happy about or did not understand what we're using it for. I'm in the workplace as a Black woman in STEM with hidden disabilities. People see you or see me and just see, oh, one aspect. They do not know what we go through every single day. And we are participating in these things because we are fighting for justice, okay? We're spending our time for free on a Tuesday on this presentation, giving presentations, because this is our way of fighting for justice, okay? And my question to you is that, okay, I'm going to graduate in a month and I can't be involved in student organizations, but how do I continue to support you in your mission and ASU in the roles that you play fighting for justice for all kinds of minorities and disenfranchised people?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. I think because it speaks to one of the themes of the conference, right? Sustainability. During Black History Month, Dr. Mako Fitzward facilitated a conversation between Black activists who were here, who were at ASU in the 80s and 90s, as well as Alana Brayboy, not related to Brian Bayboy, just happen to have the last name, as far as I know. But one of the things that came out of that conversation was the ways in which community plays a role in the student experience. And so it becomes an extension of our education, our justice, equity, and diversity work when we connect with community. I think that it is a disservice on the part of the university that does not recognize those connections as educational and hasn't found a way to credit people for the work that they do in community. Now, some people don't want those two things to mix, but I think that it is very important to recognize that the work that we do in community, both in ASU community, but also community at large, right? Like we are global. We are globally connected. And so the work that we do in community globally is really important. So to your question of how to continue is to really stay connected with the people who are still here. Community can hold us accountable and we can hold community accountable, but also as an alumni, you hold a great deal of power because the university is gonna come after you for money, right? Like they're gonna ask you for money. And so with that, being able to say, okay, fine, I'll donate. I'll make sure that $25 or $50 comes out of my paycheck or whatever, but I want to make sure that it goes to the multicultural center. I want to make sure that it goes to supporting students who are in underrepresented fields. I want to make sure that, right? And so being very direct on where your dollars go, because honestly, the university is still a business, and so money talks, right? And so I think those are some of the ways in which you and others can continue to support even after post being an ASU student.
Thank you very much.
Miranda.
Hi, Jamal. Thank you for your presentation. I guess this is kind of like a broad / open question, but I was wondering just what your thoughts on like how we do this work and convey this information across the university, especially when like you go higher up in the university, there's fewer underrepresented people. So I was just kind of wondering like what your personal thoughts on like how do we make change and how do we how do we like explain these dynamics within the university? You know, there's only so many people or of us here today. Yeah.
That's thank you, Miranda. That is an extremely difficult question because of the way in which we have certain mechanisms of change set up. I think it becomes more and more difficult because, like you said, there's a certain number of us here today. But we'll just take the example of there are, as of 2019-2020 school year, there were about 400 Black graduate students in all of ASU, right? 400 Black graduate students in all of ASU, barely comprising 3% of the graduate population. So right now, the graduate population doesn't even reflect the state population of African Americans. So there's a growth outside of ASU, but not within. And so part of my thoughts around this is that there must be intentionality in the recruitment, retention, recruitment and retention of faculty and staff throughout the university, right? Like no shade, but a little bit of shade, like looking at biological sciences, looking at some of the engineering programs and the number of Black faculty, looking at some of the, even if we expand Black faculty to include international faculty, it is still wanting. And I think that while that may not, the administration may not say that that is intentional, there is a design element that must be recognized. So one, we just need more people, right? We need more people to fight the fight. Until that time, I think a more coordinated effort with Black students, with with all students, with faculty, have to put pressure on administration, and administration has to recognize the issues and hopefully not operate from a deficit model, but operate from a model of possibility and not a slow possibility, right? They say, oh, things are slow to change. Things are only slow to change when we put that on, right? I think that is a really important way of framing the ways in which we move forward, because while institutionally the ship may be slow to rotate, there are incremental ways in which we can go ahead and move forward with a more equitable agenda. I'm also gonna just say this, and this is if you have any follow-up questions, just let me know. But I think there are too few students that take accountability, and not enough students that students and faculty and administration that actually take accountability for, I'll say, a lack of vision. Like sometimes we have to be really clear on what it is that we want. Right. And so I think the idea of like the long Black freedom struggle, at a certain point, you know, civil rights, we wanted rights for Black people. We wanted to be equal. Now we are at a place where we're just like, shoot, I just don't want to be shot. Like if you pull me over because I was speeding, okay, I am willing to accept accountability and responsibility for that, but don't shoot me. And so I think, right, like that's the reality that we live in. And so I think that understanding the accountability factor, but being very clear on what is it that we want, is really going to be key to how fast change happens and how many people actually come to join a fight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jamal.
Michelle?
I ultimately had the same question as Miranda, and I know that that was a really complex question and you did a great job at answering it. And I think one of the only other, I know that there's a tight schedule today, and I think Miranda's the next presenter actually. So I guess recently someone framed this to me as like symptoms versus source. So, you know, for example, Miranda and I just saw a dissertation announcement, and, you know, it's a white male student, and his entire 6 committee members are white males and white females. And then we were like, well, let's see, what did he have to choose from? He only had white people to choose from in a program about society and biology. So, you know, it's really reduced to the point of like, there's some structural changes that could be made too, but also it's about bringing in people. So yeah, if you just had any like kind of last minute things with this idea of what are the source and what are the symptoms, I'd be happy to hear them, but I know we're short on time. So.
Yeah, I mean, as bluntly as I can put it, the source is the historical manifestations of oppression that continue to be entrenched in academia, especially here at ASU, right? like that's the simplest way I can put the source. I think that the symptoms, and so the symptoms actually echo some of that. I think that right, because when I think of like source, right, source, I then think of like solutions. So how do we solve for this? And I really don't have a really good answer for that. But right now, my thoughts are really, like I said in my presentation, we have to recognize the disproportionate labor that goes on. We have to recognize the contradictions that occur, right? My experience as a Black graduate student is different from a white graduate student. Those have to be recognized, and so there have to be safeguards put into place, not necessarily to make a different experience, but to make sure that those experiences aren't inequitable. And so, like you said, like if all you have to select from is all of the one choice, then that's not an interpersonal issue. That's a systemic issue, right? And so how are we going to address it both systemically and then come to a place where we can address it interpersonally?
Thank you, Jamal. I appreciate your thoughts on that.
Thank you. All right. Well, I am out of time. Thank you all so much for listening to me. And I'm actually, is it okay if I transition to Miranda?